Shavua Tov, good vach. It's great to be back in the saddle and learning with you, my holy sisters and brothers. Let's light up the darkness with a new wisdom candle. Who's in the house on a Saturday night, starting the week off with some beautiful learning from Tractate Sanhedrin? Yosef in Englewood, New Jersey. Bill in mid-Missouri. Glad to see you back. Hope Miami went well. Thank God it did. Wonderful visit to the Miami Jewish Film Festival. Big thanks to them and to the Betsy Hotel, which took really good care of me. And what a treat. I normally don't mention the hotel that I stayed at, but they, I think they sponsored the festival and contributed my room. And what a charming, unusual hotel, owned by Jonathan and Deborah Plutskin, who are the children of Chaim Plutskin, who I was not familiar with his work, but a great 20th century poet who was shortlisted for the Pulitzer Prize 3 times. And his kids, when they purchased this hotel, created a room in the hotel called the Writer's Room, which I was privileged to stay in. And what a great hotel room with shelves full of books, framed poems by Chaim, and nightly jazz, live music in the lobby. I mean, just so charming. Stayed in South Beach. My dad lives in Boynton Beach, which is north of Fort Lauderdale, closer to West Palm. And so that's usually where I go when I go to Florida. I haven't had a chance to spend time in Miami, and this time I did, and I loved it. I love Miami. What a great town. Wonderful kosher eating up in Surfside. A bunch of places over there that I really enjoyed, especially 26 Sushi and Wok. Can highly recommend it. And the Miami Jewish Film Festival itself, beautifully organized, so many good films. Caught a small movie from Israel while I was there called Neither by Day Nor by Night. That's not going to be an easy movie to find, but if you can, really, really interesting. About a Sephardi Baal Tshuva family in the Holy Land, making their way as they become more religious, and their kids, their oldest son has a challenge ahead of him in getting into the right yeshiva, or getting to the yeshiva that he would like to go to. Very interesting movie. So, and the screenings of Guns N' Moses, phenomenal, wonderful, positive reaction. As we're a few more festivals in this festival season, but we're working hard getting ready for the release, which should be, unless something changes, we haven't made the official announcement, but it should be April 25th. Guns N' Moses coming to a theater near you, screens across America. Okay. Karen in Northern California, Shandor in the Bronx, Stephen in New Hampshire, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Lucy in Minnesota, Joseph in the Sierra Nevada, Sharon in New Jersey, Marjorie in Georgia. Looking forward to the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. Wonderful event that's going to be. A return for me. My first film, our first film, When Do We Eat, played in the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival 20 years ago. And it's playing again this year, as well as Guns and Moses. So Nina and I are both going to that and very excited to attend the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival next month. IFA in Florida. All right, let's get busy. We are behind, of course. Normally when I'm away a few days, I get back, I'm going to try to double up, do some double dafs. But these pages are so full and rich and large in Tractate Sanhedrin, we'll just stay behind until it makes sense to do maybe 1.5 pages here and there and try to get caught up. But listen, my first time through Daf Yomi, the group that I was with, our teacher was a phenomenal rabbi. But he often had us 2 weeks behind. So, we're just 4 days behind. It's not so bad. I think we're 4 days behind, maybe a little more. But we'll make it up. Don't you worry. Okay. Our daf tonight is page 27 here in Tractate Sanhedrin. Continuing our discussion of Mishna number 4 in chapter 3. No, Mishna number 3. We're going to get to Mishna number 4 today. Okay. We picked this up at the very bottom of page 26b, and we were talking about witnesses that are disqualified, people that are disqualified from giving testimony in a rabbinic court, in a beis din, and we continue that discussion. A conspiring witness is one who testified that a certain incident occurred at a particular time and place, and then 2 other witnesses testify that this person was elsewhere at that time and could not have been there to witness what he claims he witnessed. And the Gemara discusses the disqualification of a conspiring witness from providing testimony in other cases. It was stated, and now we're on page 27a, concerning a conspiring witness, Abaye says, he is disqualified retroactively. What does this mean? From when he provided his testimony. So, we're marking periods of time. Now, normally you would think, okay, a conspiring witness, right? Somebody who's proven to be a conspiring witness. First, he gave his testimony, right? When he first appeared in court, he gave his testimony as a witness, and there would have to be a pair of witnesses for a matter to be established. So these 2 witnesses came and say, hey, I saw that guy rob a bank. Right? And then the alleged bank robber brings another pair of witnesses who testify that those 2 witnesses who say they saw the guy rob the bank, well, they claim that they saw this bank robbed, on Main Street at noon on Monday. But at noon on Monday, those guys were not in this city. They were in another city as witnessed by these 2 other people. Now, perhaps the bank robber brings those 2 witnesses on the same day, right after the first witnesses who are then shown to be conspiring witnesses. Or maybe when those 2 witnesses appear, it's a surprise. There wasn't, pretrial discovery and all these other kinds of motion practice that we're used to in American jurisprudence when we see it in movies and TV. But rather, those 2 witnesses appear in court, and the guy is convicted, and he has to make amends, and whatever other punishments fall to him for his conviction of bank robbery. But then he does his investigation, and 3 months later, he finds these other 2 witnesses who demonstrate that the original witnesses were conspiring witnesses. Now, during that 3-month period, those conspiring witnesses, who we've now shown are frauds and liars, maybe they were hired out to give false testimony in other cases, or maybe they gave legitimate testimony in other cases during that 3-month period. So the question is, once we establish that somebody's a conspiring witness, they are prohibited from giving testimony in the future, at least in certain types of cases. So the question is, Now that they're established as conspiring witnesses, do we retroactively go back into that period between when they first gave their false testimony and 3 months later when it was proven that they were conspiring witnesses and invalidate any testimony that they gave in between the original testimony and the moment when they were established as conspiring witnesses? Or do we say that, well, they only became established as conspiring witnesses when these other two witnesses came and said, no, the testimony must have been false because we saw them in this other city at that time. And it was only from the time of that second testimony of the second pair of witnesses that the first pair were established as conspiring witnesses. So from then on, they're prohibited from giving testimony, but any testimony that they gave in the interim would not be invalidated, would not be disqualified. And so if, for example, they signed their names as witnesses on a purchase and sale agreement, somebody, bought a house and they were there and they acted as the witnesses, do we say that since we established them as conspiring witnesses later, but they signed that purchase and sale agreement in between their original testimony and when they were established as conspiring witnesses, that then now that purchase and sale agreement is invalidated? And those people who made a deal to sell a house that had nothing to do with this other case of the bank robbery, maybe they now have to make a new contract and get new witnesses to it. So when we say retroactively, what we mean is that any witness job that they did, whether signing on a contract or giving witness testimony in a court, would be invalidated in that period between their original testimony and the time when they were established as conspiring witnesses. No one is saying that any testimony they ever gave would be invalidated. Retroactively just means, do we go back to the time when they first lied in court, which was later established as conspiring witnesses, or do we simply say that from when they were established as conspiring witnesses, from then on, they can no longer give testimony? So that is what we're going to be debating here. So Abaye says he is disqualified retroactively. Right? So in that period between when he first testified and when it's established as conspiring witnesses, all that testimony in that period is invalidated. And Rava says he is disqualified only from that point forward. When the second set of witnesses establish him as conspiring witness, from then on any testimony he gives is no good and he's not permitted to give testimony anymore because he's been established as a liar in court. So Rava from that point forward, Abaye retroactively as well. The Gemara explains the reasons for the two opinions. Abaye says he is disqualified retroactively because it is from that time when he testified that he is considered a wicked man. From the time that he lied, from then we know that he's a wicked man. We didn't know he was a wicked man in between the time of that false testimony and when it was proven that he gave false testimony. But he gave false testimony at that earlier date. So he was a wicked man in that period, and we shouldn't accept any testimony from him at that time. And the Torah stated, do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness in Exodus 23:1. And this is interpreted to mean, do not allow a wicked man to serve as a witness. And since you know that he was wicked from the time of that first testimony, don't accept anything that he said or signed during that period afterward. Rava says that he is disqualified only from that point forward, when the second witnesses came and established him as a conspiring witness, because the disqualification of a conspiring witness is a novelty, i.e., it is not based on logic. What do you mean it's not based on logic? This guy lied in court. Two people came and proved that he lied in court because he couldn't have been where he said he was. What's the novelty? The reason is that this is a case of two witnesses against two other witnesses, in which case the testimony of neither should be accepted. If two witnesses in the original case came and said, we saw this guy rob a bank, and two other witnesses came at that time and said, we were there, that guy didn't rob the bank. It was another guy who robbed the bank. We don't know where he is, but it wasn't this guy. Now you have two witnesses versus two witnesses. And because what they say contradicts each other, we discredit all the testimony. In other words, we don't have what to convict, right? We don't have a testimony on which we can convict this man, so he gets off because two witnesses contradict the other. Now, if the second two witnesses came and said, Joe didn't rob the bank, Mitch robbed the bank, would we then convict Mitch? No, because again, the two testimonies contradict each other. The two testimonies of two witnesses each contradict each other, and we can't convict any man based on contradictory testimonies. Well, here we have the conspiring witness testimony where these two guys say, we were there and we saw Joe rob the bank. And then the second set of witnesses come and say, no, the first two witnesses weren't there. We saw those first two witnesses in another city on that day at that time. So it's two contradictory testimonies. Why don't we just invalidate all the testimony? And then, okay, the guy doesn't get convicted, but we don't establish that first pair of witnesses as proven liars who can never be relied on to give testimony again. That is a novelty in the Torah. And how do we assess this? Well, what did you see that causes you to rely on the second set of witnesses who testified that the first set were not at the scene of the purported event? You could instead rely upon the first set of witnesses who testified to the event, and consequently, you could disbelieve the second set. I mean, what if the second set are liars? How do we know they're not? And yet, the Torah teaches that the second set of witnesses is always deemed credible, and the first set is subjected to punishment as conspiring witnesses. This is an unexpected development that we rely on because it's in the Torah, but it's not according to logic. Therefore, as the disqualification of a conspiring witness is an anomaly, you have the right to disqualify him only from the time of its novelty and onward, i.e., when the second set of witnesses arrived and discredited the testimony. From then on, the conspiring witnesses are deemed conspiring witnesses and we can't use their testimony, but testimony that they gave prior to that moment when they were established as conspiring witnesses, we don't disqualify it. We don't apply this ruling retroactively. So that's what Rava holds, as distinct from Abaye, who would disqualify them retroactively back to when they first gave the false testimony. Now, there are those who say that Rava also holds like Abaye, who says that by rights, a conspiring witness should be disqualified retroactively from when he provided his testimony. And what is the reason that Rava says that the witness is disqualified only from that point forward? It is due to the potential monetary loss for purchasers, right? So Rava would agree with Abaye. We should discredit them from the time that they gave that false testimony, and we shouldn't believe anything they said after that. But from a policy perspective, and that's why the example I gave earlier was that in between giving that false testimony and later being established as conspiring witnesses, in between they signed somebody's purchase and sale agreement. Like maybe they were just because they did that for a friend, they happened to be there. It really had nothing to do with giving false testimony. But if we now say that they're disqualified and discredited as witnesses and retroactively disqualify anything they sign, then that purchase and sale agreement would be voided. And that would mean that whoever bought that house didn't buy the house. And that could create a big problem, right? In just commercial transactions, real estate transactions, for example. And so as a policy matter, we don't void them retroactively. Now the Gemara asks, okay, so what is the practical difference between these two explanations of Rava's opinion? Does Rava hold that it's because of the anomaly and we only invalidate anything that they would witness going forward from the moment of being established? Or the reason we only do it from that point is because of protection and, concern for people who might be hurt if these guys, signed purchase and sale transactions between the original testimony and when they were disqualified. Either way, it's not retroactive. So what would the difference be if it's one reason or the other reason for why Rava holds as he holds? After all, according to both explanations, Rava did not apply the disqualification of conspiring witnesses retroactively. So the Gemara explains that there is a difference between these explanations in a case where two witnesses testify about one of the witnesses that he was not at the scene of the supposed event, and two other witnesses testify about the other witness in a similar manner. So you don't have two witnesses who saw the two witnesses somewhere else, and that you could easily see why that happens. If they were liars, they weren't really where they said they were. Well, then, who's to say that they were together at that time and place? So probably you would have to bring in two pairs of witnesses to show where those two people were at that time. You probably would need two separate sets of witnesses to establish where the conspiring witnesses were at that time. Okay. So why would that matter? Why would that matter? Either way, they weren't there. Says the Gemara, alternatively, there is a practical difference between the two explanations in a case where two witnesses disqualified the first set of witnesses by testifying that the first set had once committed robbery and are therefore unfit to give testimony. So if the reason that Rava does not disqualify conspiring witnesses retroactively is that it is a novel ruling, then it is limited to that case. But if it is to protect purchasers, they would apply to the disqualifications of all witnesses, not only conspiring witnesses. Because what would happen then, if sounds like if you had two sets of witnesses, or if you brought in witnesses who say that these people were disqualified because, for example, they're related to the defendant or to a judge or something like that, or some other reason, well, then they're not conspiring witnesses. And are we going to apply the retroactive, disqualification or not, would have a different outcome. I'm going to move forward. And Rav Yirmiyah of Difti related that Rav Papi once performed an action, meaning he issued a practical ruling, in accordance with the opinion of Rava, that we don't disqualify retroactively. And Mar Bar Rav Ashi says the law is in accordance with the opinion of Abaye. We do disqualify these people retroactively to the time that they gave false testimony. Anything they did after that is discredited. And the Gemara comments, and in disputes between Abaye and Rava, remember this principle, the law, the halacha, is in accordance with the opinion of Rava. Right? So generally, when it's Rava versus Abaye, we hold like Rava, except for 6 cases in which the law is in accordance with the opinion of Abaye. And they are, in these cases, represented by a mnemonic. To help you remember these 6 cases, Yud, Ayin, Lamed, Kuf, Gimel, Mem. The Yud is Yeush, right? This is Yeush, is when somebody has lost an object. He's still the owner of that object until he despairs of ever recovering it, and then the object is considered ownerless. Adim, which is conspiring witnesses, where we follow Abaye, not Rava, that they're disqualified retroactively. The side post is a lechi. We learned that way back in Tractate Shabbos, and I think again in Eruvin, about when you can establish that a domain is a place where you can carry on Shabbos or not, using a side post. Kiddushin, betrothal, that is not given to consummation, that doesn't lead to chuppah. Revealing intent with a get, and an apostate who sins rebelliously. We're actually not going to go into those 6 cases. Just know that we generally follow Rava when he disputes Abaye, except in those 6 exceptions. Now, the Gemara cites another dispute between Abaye and Rava with regard to disqualification of a witness concerning a transgressor who eats nevelas. Right? So in other words, an animal that is a kosher animal, but it was not slaughtered in a kosher manner. Therefore, that meat is not kosher for Jews to eat. So if you have a Jew that eats such meat because he thinks it tastes good and it's cheaper, whatever, he doesn't care about Torah law, are we going to allow him to testify in a beis din? Well, if he eats this non-kosher meat due to appetite, i.e. because he desires this type of meat, or because it is cheaper, or it is otherwise more accessible. So everyone agrees that he is disqualified from bearing witness. It is suspected that just as he transgresses the halachas of the Torah to satisfy his appetite, so too he is willing to testify falsely for personal benefit. Now, with regard to one who eats non-kosher meat, to express insolence. So it's not just that it's, a convenience for him, he just likes it, it's cheaper, but this is somebody, who's presumably an apostate who just, he declares himself an atheist, that there is no God who runs the world, God forbid a Jew should say that, and so he eats it to just show that he doesn't hold by Torah, he doesn't hold by the will of our Creator. So he eats this for insolence. What about that? Can he give testimony? Abaye says, yeah, he's disqualified from bearing witness. But Rava says he is fit. And Abaye says he is disqualified because he is wicked. And the merciful one states, do not put the wicked in a position to serve as a witness. And Rava says that he is fit because for one to be disqualified from bearing witness, we require him to be a wicked person who's guilty of specifically a monetary transgression, dechamas, for example, robbery. And this is because the verse, do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous, chamas, witness. Exodus 23:1 alludes to such a transgression. We're talking about cases of monetary law. Cases of damages, cases of robbery. We're not talking about murder. We're talking about some kind of theft or an injury resulting in damages. So it's a monetary transgression. And this one who eats nevela, who eats unkosher meat, not because it's cheaper, or not just to satisfy his appetite, which has a monetary component, but rather because he just wants to offend heaven, or he doesn't care what heaven thinks, in other words, well, that's not a monetary transgression. So according to Rava, he hasn't disqualified himself from testifying in a case of monetary law. I mean, just because he has this attitude about heaven doesn't mean that he won't speak truthfully when he's called to testify for other people in a case that involves monetary law. And the Gemara raises an objection to Rava from a baraisa. Now, the verse, do not put your hand with the wicked to be an unrighteous witness, and unrighteous is how we're translating the word Hamas, is interpreted, the Hebrew word Hamas, is interpreted in the following manner. Do not put the wicked in a position to serve as a witness. Do not put one who is guilty of a monetary transgression in a position to serve as a witness. Well, these are robbers and those who betray oaths, who are disqualified from bearing witness. And so now the Gemara explains its objection. And what? Doesn't the category of those who betray oaths refer to both one who takes an oath in vain, without any monetary application, and one who falsely takes an oath that concerns monetary matters? So apparently, any transgressor is disqualified, even if he did so to express insolence and not for monetary gain. Now the Gemara takes the other side of the argument. No, both this and that oath, included in the phrase in the Baraisa, those who betray oaths, are oaths concerning monetary matters. And accordingly, what is the reason that the Baraisa uses the word oaths in plural? The Baraisa is referring to oaths in general, not to multiple categories of oaths like oaths that involve monetary matters and oaths that do not, but just people who take oaths. And here it's understood that we're talking about oaths that have a monetary component. So according to Rava, the one who eats nevela out of insolence is not disqualified because it doesn't have a monetary component. Now the Gemara is going to now examine Abaye's view, right? That somebody who eats out of insolence is a wicked person, and we don't accept his testimony. Now the Gemara will challenge this from a different baraisa. Do not put the wicked in a position to serve as a witness. Do not put one who is guilty of monetary transgression in a position to serve as a witness. And who are these? These are robbers and those who lend money with interest. Now, obviously a Jew who lends at interest to another Jew. So the fact that only monetary transgressions are mentioned does not accord with the opinion of Abaye, who is saying any kind of wickedness would disqualify you. This would seem to indicate that wickedness in this context refers to transgressions involving monetary matters. So the Gemara concludes the refutation of the opinion of Abaye is indeed a conclusive refutation. So you might think we follow Rava, and we're only going to discredit as from giving witnesses, from bearing testimony in the future, people who were wicked with regard to some monetary matter, but if their transgression did involve a monetary matter, they would be permitted to give testimony in a case concerning monetary matters. But that's not the law. The law is we follow Abaye. When it comes to which witnesses are qualified or disqualified, we follow Abaye. So anyone who's established as wicked, right, established as wicked, that would require that there were witnesses who saw him do it, etc. But if he's wicked, even with respect to non-monetary matters, he is disqualified from giving testimony in a Beis Din. That could be reversed when he makes an atonement, but until then, they're disqualified. Now, it just said conclusive refutation of Abaye. So how is it that we follow Abaye? Let's see how we get there. The Gemara suggests, let us say that this dispute is parallel to a dispute between Tanaim, the sages of the Mishna. A conspiring witness is disqualified from bearing witness about any matter in the entire Torah. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosei says, in what situation is this statement said? Where he was rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a case of capital law. He conspired to have somebody sentenced to conviction of a capital crime, meaning murder, and the punishment would be execution. That's a very seriously warped, or evil, or certainly wicked witness who would conspire with another to testify against a defendant in a capital case. Since he is assumed to have testified falsely with regard to a matter of life and death, he would certainly treat less serious testimonies lightly. Therefore, he is disqualified from bearing witness on any matter. But, this is what Rabbi Yosei is saying, if he was rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a case of monetary law, he is fit to testify about cases of capital law, as there is no indication that he treats this matter lightly. Just because he was able to be bought off or lie for whatever his motivation was in a case, where the damages would amount to $10,000, doesn't mean that he would perjure himself in a case where the defendant stands to be executed. We don't have such an indication, so we would let him testify. We would certainly hear in that court that he lied in some other case about monetary law, and the judges could evaluate whether to believe him or not, but we would let him come forward and testify. Now, the Gemara concludes its suggestion. Let us say that the opinion of Abaye, right? So remember, Rabbi Meir says if you're a conspiring witness in any kind of case, you're disqualified from giving testimony ever again in any kind of case. And Rabbi Yosei says if you are proven to be a conspiring witness in a big matter, then you're disqualified from ever giving testimony again in any matter. But if you're only established a conspiring witness in a minor matter, a monetary matter, then you're not disqualified from giving testimony in a major matter like capital law. That's the difference between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yosef. So now the Gemara suggests, let us say that the opinion of Abaye, once wicked, disqualified, and retroactively, that or now we're just talking about Abaye with respect to one who eats nevela meat, disqualified. So the opinion of Abaye is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, conspiring on anything, disqualified for everything, and the opinion of Rava, if you eat nevela out of insolence, you could still testify. That this is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. If you're only established conspiring witness in a minor matter, you could still testify in a major matter. And the Gemara clarifies. The opinion of Abaye is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that we say from being rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a minor issue, one is disqualified from bearing witness even with regard to a major issue. And the opinion of Rava is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who says that we say that from being rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a relatively major issue, one is disqualified with regard to a relatively minor issue, but we do not say that from being rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a relatively minor issue, one is disqualified even with regard to a relatively major issue, right? So they establish this parallel, but does it really track? And the Gemara rejects. No. Everyone agrees that according to the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, one who is rendered a conspiring witness with regard to a minor issue is not suspected of lying about a major issue. But where Abaye and Rava disagree, it is according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, i.e. they disagree concerning exactly what it is that Rabbi Meir holds. So Abaye holds, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and derives from his opinion that one who eats non-kosher meat to express insolence, not out of convenience or appetite, but rather insolence, he is disqualified from bearing witness. And Rava holds only there, with regard to a conspiring witness in a monetary case, does Rabbi Meir state his ruling that one who is rendered a conspiring witness about a minor issue is suspected of lying with regard to major issues as well. Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that he is both bad toward heaven, having transgressed the prohibition against bearing false witness, and bad toward people, having caused another person to lose money unrightfully. So he is therefore suspected of testifying falsely with regard to any matter. But here, with regard to one who eats non-kosher meat to express insolence, a person who is bad toward heaven, but is not proven to be bad toward people, he is not disqualified. And so the Gemara concludes, and the halacha, the law, is in accordance with the opinion of Abaye. And that's how we come back to Abaye. And the Gemara asks, but wasn't his opinion conclusively refuted? And the Gemara answers, that Baraisa, from which Abaye's opinion was refuted, is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. And Abaye does not accept Rabbi Yosef's opinion, and apparently we don't either, because the law was established according to Abaye, and therefore probably according to Rabbi Meir and these other kinds of cases. Now the Gemara asks, and let it even be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. According to the principles of halakhic ruling in a dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yosef, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef. So how can his opinion be rejected? And the Gemara answered, there it is different. As the Tana taught us an unattributed Mishna in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Right? So very often, when there's a Mishnah, and it's not usually an unattributed Mishnah, we follow that law. And for example, the Mishnah we're going to counter today, Mishnah number 4, first it'll be just, this is the law. And then Rabbi Yehuda says. So when it says Rabbi Yehuda says, that's the minority opinion that we don't follow. The majority opinion is not given in the name of any sage. That's an unattributed Mishnah, which we follow. Now, why don't they give the name of the sage whose law we follow? Well, very often it's Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir formulated many of the Mishnayos, and it's kind of first a credit to him that the unattributed ones are sort of, we understand they're in his name, and it doesn't need to be said, but also because Rabbi Meir got himself in a little bit of political hot water with the other sages, and so his name was taken off certain Mishnayos, but that was political problems, not with his, tremendous acumen as one of the sages. So let's get back to this. There it is different. As the Tana taught us an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And it is a general principle that the law is in accordance with rulings found in unattributed Mishnayos. And the Gemara asks, and where did the Tana teach us such an unattributed Mishnah? And where do we find it? Where in the Mishnah? And the Gemara answer, and again, the Mishnah, right, means like all of the collection of individual Mishnayos. Mishnayos is plural of Mishnah. But we can also talk about a single Mishnah, like Mishnah number 3 or Mishnah number 4. So the word Mishnah can both mean a Mishnah, a particular Mishnah, or the whole collection of Mishnayos. That was the first writing down of the oral tradition. And that redaction was supervised and completed by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi around the year 200 of the Common Era. And the next layer of commentary provided by the sages of the Gemara, known as Amoraim, over the next 300 years, that collection of commentaries called the Gemara, and that ended about the year 500 of the Common Era. And the Gemara plus the Mishnah is the Talmud, for anyone who's joining us lately. Okay, so where do we find this particular unattributed Mishnah? And the Gemara answers that this was established through a certain incident. What happened in this incident? That incident occurred in which a man named Bar Chama killed a person. And the exilarch, the leader of the Jewish community in Bavel, Babylonia, which was part of the Persian Empire at this time. So the leader of the Jewish community in Bavel said to Rav Abba Bar Yaakov, go investigate this case. And if he certainly killed him, let them put his eyes out. Already strange. This is what we're talking about, the word kill. Kill is not necessarily murder. If it is murder, well, then he should be subject to the death penalty. Why would the punishment be put his eyes out? Okay, good questions. We're not going to answer those questions. We'll remember those questions. Subsequently, 2 witnesses came and testified that this man certainly killed the victim. Bar Chama then went and brought 2 other witnesses who testified about one of those first witnesses. And one of these witnesses said that this person stole in my presence a kav of barley. And the other one said he stole in my presence the handle of a spear. Now we're on page 27b. Okay, so one of the 2 witnesses that was used to convict Bar Chama of the killing had previously committed monetary crimes, right? One stole food, barley, a kav of barley, and the other stole the handle of a spear. Rav Abba Bar Yaakov said to Bar Chama, why do you bring these witnesses? What do you hold? Do you hold like Rabbi Meir, that one who is guilty of a monetary transgression is disqualified from bearing witness in capital cases too? But in a dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yosei, the law is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei. And doesn't Rabbi Yosei say that if one was rendered a conspiring witness in a case of monetary law, he remains fit to testify in cases of capital law? Rav Papi immediately said to him, this statement applies only where the Tana did not teach us an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And here, the Tana taught us an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Conspiring witness in a monetary case, disqualified from testifying, even in a capital case. That's what Rabbi Meir says. So the Gemara asks, from what Mishnah is it seen that the Tana taught an unattributed Mishnah in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir? If we say it is from that which we learned in a Mishnah in Tractate Nida, page 49b, anyone who is fit to adjudicate cases of capital law is fit to adjudicate cases of monetary law. Okay, that makes sense. Adjudicate. Now we're talking about judges, not witnesses. And a judge who's qualified to judge a capital case where life and death is on the line, he's also qualified to judge a case of monetary law where only money is on the line. Makes perfect sense. The stakes are much lower. On the other hand, perhaps we should say, well, capital law, that's a whole body of law and, killing, witness, murder, motive, opportunity, means, versus monetary law, which maybe requires a great knowledge of financial law, transactional law, contracts, deeds of sale. Maybe it's a different body of law, so maybe it shouldn't be somebody's qualified automatically. But okay, over there in Nida it says if a judge is qualified to judge capital cases, he is also qualified to judge monetary cases. Well, how does that apply here? Says the Gemara. It doesn't. That is inconclusive. Even though one can compare the laws of disqualifying judges to the laws of disqualifying witnesses, one cannot cite this as an example of a Mishnah taught in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, whose opinion is recorded in this Mishnah. If we say it is the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, isn't there the counterexample of a conspiring witness in monetary matters who is fit to adjudicate cases of capital law, but is disqualified from adjudicating cases of monetary law? Rather, is the ruling of the Mishnah not the opinion of Rabbi Meir? And so the Gemara explains why this cannot be the source. If this is the unattributed Mishnah that Rav Papi was referring to, from where is it derived that it is the opinion of Rabbi Meir? It's an unattributed Mishnah. How do you know it's really Rabbi Meir? Perhaps the Mishnah is referring to those who are disqualified from serving as judges due to their lineage, which has nothing to do with monetary law or even capital law, but rather that judges are not are permitted to come from the pool of mamzerim, right? Somebody who's a mamzer, so, a Jew, tragically, will be born from a Jewish mother who cheated on her husband, committed adultery, got pregnant, so the child of that union is a mamzer. It was just a tragic case. He's not allowed to marry other Jews, only other mamzers. Very, very sad outcome for the child. And a mamzer is not permitted to serve as a judge, at least in capital cases. And interestingly, I didn't know this. I don't know if this is the actual law, but at least according to that ruling over there, converts cannot serve as judges in a beis din for certain kinds of cases. So that's called lineage. Now, as if you do not say so, then with regard to the latter clause of that Mishnah, which teaches there is one who is fit to adjudicate cases of monetary law, but is not fit to adjudicate cases of capital law. And to whom could this be referring? Why would one be unfit to adjudicate cases of capital law? If it is referring to one who was rendered a conspiring witness in a case of capital law, is he fit to adjudicate cases of monetary law? Everyone agrees. If you're not fit to adjudicate capital law, you can't, or certainly if you're a conspiring witness in a capital case, you're disqualified from ever giving testimony in any kind of case. We already saw that. Doesn't everyone agree that he is disqualified? So rather, the Mishnah is clearly referring to those who are disqualified from serving as judges due to their lineage. And here too, in the first clause, the Mishnah is referring to those who are disqualified from serving as judges due to their lineage. So rather, the Tana taught us an unattributed Mishnah. So we haven't found the unattributed Mishnah that's relevant and is actually Rabbi Meir's. So now we're going somewhere else. It's from here, as we learned in a Mishnah in Tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 22a. These people are disqualified from bearing witness, as they are considered wicked and guilty of monetary transgressions. One who plays with dice. Well, this sounds very familiar. This is the Mishnah we're talking about now. Very similar, but not exactly the same, because it's not from Tractate Sanhedrin. It's from Tractate Rosh Hashanah. Who's disqualified? One who plays with dice, and one who lends money with interest, and those who fly pigeons, and merchants who trade in produce of the sabbatical year, and Canaanite slaves. This is the principle. For any testimony for which a woman is not fit, these too are not fit. Although in certain cases a woman's testimony is accepted, for example, testimony concerning the death of someone's husband, in most cases her testimony is not valid. Ancient world, they didn't want to bring women to testify in a beis din for a number of reasons. We're not going to get into that now. In accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? If we say it is the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, that is difficult. But isn't there testimony in cases of capital law for which a woman is not fit, but for which those considered wicked due to having committed monetary transgressions are fit? Rather, is it not the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who maintains these people are disqualified from testifying in cases of capital law as well? So apparently this unspecified Mishnah follows the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and therefore the law is in accordance with Rabbi Meir. And based on this conclusion, one of the witnesses who testified against Bar Chama with regard to the murder, it was a murder, was disqualified, and Bar Chama was acquitted. And Bar Chama then arose and kissed Rabbi Papi on his feet and accepted upon himself to pay his taxes for all of his years out of gratitude for bringing this ruling that saved his life. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3, here in chapter 3 of Tractate Sanhedrin. Now Mishnah number 4. And these are the ones disqualified from bearing witness or from serving as judges due to their status as relatives of one of the litigants or of each other, right? So just simple example, a brother of the defendant cannot testify on behalf of the defendant because they're related. And two brothers cannot come and give testimony as the pair of witnesses because they're related to each other. Nor can two judges be brothers, nor can any judge be a brother of either of the litigants, etc. What are the relationships besides brothers? Okay. Brother, paternal uncle, maternal uncle, sister's husband, husband of his paternal aunt, and the husband of his maternal aunt, and his mother's husband, and his father-in-law, and his brother-in-law, i.e. the husband of his wife's sister, they, themselves, all of these people, and also their sons and their sons-in-law are considered relatives and therefore disqualified from giving testimony or serving as a judge for these litigants. And his stepson alone is disqualified, but the sons of his stepson or sons-in-law are not. Rabbi Yosei says this aforementioned law is Rabbi Akiva's version of the Mishnah. But the initial version of the Mishnah reads as follows: his uncle and the sons of his uncle and anyone who is fit to inherit from him. Meaning, only paternal relatives who are fit to inherit from him are disqualified. Maternal relatives who do not inherit from him are not disqualified from bearing witness about him or from adjudicating his case. Then the law disqualifying a relative from bearing witness or serving as a judge is referring to anyone who is related to him at the time of the trial. Right? The relationship could change by, since a marriage could occur in between the incident and the trial. If one was once a relative and became unrelated by the time of the trial, for example, he married the daughter of one of the litigants, but she died or they were divorced, in this case, he becomes fit again to testify. And Rabbi Yehuda, minority opinion, says even if his daughter died, but her husband, the former son-in-law, has children from her, then he is still considered a relative. The children cause them to remain related. Minority opinion that we don't follow. One who loves or one who hates one of the litigants is also disqualified. With regard to one who loves one of the litigants, this is referring to his groomsmen. One who hates is referring to anyone who, out of enmity, did not speak with the litigant for 3 days. And the rabbis said to Rabbi Yehuda, the Jewish people are not suspected of bearing false witness due to love or hate. So the fact that they've expressed such an emotion does not disqualify them. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. From where is this matter that relatives are disqualified from bearing witness derived? And the Gemara answers, it is as the sages taught in a Baraisa. The fathers shall not be put to death for the children. Neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. What does that have to do with witnesses being relatives? On its face, it sounds like if a father commits a crime, we don't execute his children. And if a child somebody's son commits a crime, we don't execute the father. Rather, every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So what does this have to do with witnesses? Why must the verse state this first clause? Right? If it already says every man shall be put to death for his own sin, why does it start with no, the father shall not be put to death for his son, nor the son for his father? Why is that there? It's already known from the fact that every man shall be put to death only for his own sin. So why are those first two clauses there? If it is to teach that the fathers shall not be put to death for the sin of the children, nor shall the children be put to death for the sin of the fathers, this is unnecessary, as it is in any event stated, every man shall be put to death for his own sin. So rather, the statement, the fathers shall not be put to death for the children, should be interpreted to mean that they shall not be put to death by the testimony of the children. And the statement, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers, should be interpreted to mean that they shall not be put to death by the testimony of the fathers. And the Gemara asks, and are children not put to death for the sin of the fathers? But isn't it written, Exodus 34:7, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children onto the third and onto the fourth generation. This is listing the attributes of God, right, who rewards the righteous for 1,000 generations, but who visits the sins of, or the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children onto the third and fourth generation. So it sounds like there is going to be suffering by the children on account of the sins of their father, their grandfather, and their great-grandfather. So what do you mean? And the Gemara answers, there. The verse is referring to a situation where the children adopt the actions of their ancestors as their own. If they do not behave like their ancestors, they are not punished for their ancestors' sins. Right? The children end up getting punished not because of their father's sins, but rather because they emulate their father and act like their father and commit the same sins that their father committed. And perhaps, people who are addicted to illegal and destructive behavior and they can't get out of it just by, willpower alone, if they would consider the example they're setting for their children, perhaps that would help them get out of that terrible cycle. Now the Gemara answers, I'm sorry. So this is, and I'm almost done. So questions or comments, please get them in now. And this is as it is taught in the Baraisa, the verse, and also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them, Leviticus 26:39, is referring to a case where the children adopt the actions of their ancestors as their own. Now, do you say that it is referring specifically to a case where they adopt the actions of their ancestors, or perhaps it applies even where they do not adopt their ancestors' actions? When the verse states, every man shall be put to death for his own sin, the Torah explicates that one is not put to death if he did not sin. Therefore, the verse in Leviticus is clearly referring to a case where the descendants adopt the actions of their ancestors as their own. And the Gemara asks, and are descendants not punished for the sins of their ancestors unless they adopt their behavior? But isn't it written, and they shall stumble one upon another, Leviticus 26:37. This verse is homiletically interpreted to mean that the Jewish people shall stumble, one, due to the iniquity of another, i.e., they are punished for each other's sins, which teaches that all Jews are considered guarantors for one another, i.e., they are responsible for one another, right? So we don't stand idly by the blood of our brother. And what that means, and we've seen this elsewhere, if you see other people transgressing and you don't rebuke them, maybe you're going to share in responsibility for the damages and consequences and sins that that other person causes. Is that what's going on? And the Gemara answers there. In that verse in Leviticus, the reference is to a case where others had the ability to protest the sin, but they did not protest. And consequently, they are punished for not protesting, regardless of any familial relationship that they may have with the sinner. So that's an important teaching for us, but it doesn't speak to this idea of why related witnesses and judges are disqualified. That discussion will continue tomorrow, God willing, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific, right at the top of page 28a. Take a few questions. The hour is late. Bill, while we're on the subject of conspiring witnesses, if the sages can go on digressions, surely so can we. What if the witnesses who are accused of conspiring can prove they weren't lying, but were mistaken? Say that they testify man A committed a certain crime, but man A was in another city and couldn't possibly have done it. However, man B, who did do it, is highly similar in appearance to man A, especially from a distance. Can the conspiring witnesses defend themselves by saying they mistook B for A? This is not conspiring witnesses, right? They made a mistake as to who did it. So other witnesses can come and contradict them, and that's where we would, just set aside both testimonies, and we couldn't have a conviction at all because the two sets of witnesses contradict each other. Conspiring witness means they say, I was on Main Street at noon on Monday, which is where the crime occurred. And then other witnesses come and say, well, this guy who claims that he was on Main Street in Springfield at noon on Monday couldn't have been there because we saw him in Manhattan at noon on Monday, right? So it's not what he saw that matters. It's that he claims he was at a place at a certain time and he couldn't have been there. Now, could he have a faulty memory about, those kind of details? That's a different question. But that's why conspiring witnesses is really only about them claiming where they were when, not what they saw. Tom, regarding non-kosher meat, what about someone who eats it not knowing? Is carelessness or negligence disqualifying? That's very interesting because that would be not covered in what we discussed, right? They said either insolence, they're doing it on purpose knowing it's non-kosher, or appetite, they know it's non-kosher, but they just want it and eat it anyway. Or it's cheaper, they know it's not kosher, but they eat it anyway because it's cheaper. You're saying they should have been more careful to check if it was non-kosher or not. I feel like we don't have an answer to that question because we didn't address it. And finally, Yosef, when we use the Peshat level interpretation in Torah law, do we ever have more than one application to a given scripture? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. When he says Peshat, he means the surface meaning, the straightforward meaning, as opposed to the remez, which is like a hint of something else, the Darosh, where we go deeper and connect to other places, and the Sod, which is like the secret mystical meaning in any particular law. You're saying on the surface level, do we have more than one application? I guess what you're saying is, can we, using the surface meaning, derive more than one law? And I think the answer is yes. With Peshat, it could apply to different situations because it's the simple meaning of the verse. It's where we bring in interpretations, right? Like tying it to another law, using the fact that the same word is available in two places, and we inherit a tradition because we don't do this ourselves, that we can learn out a separate law from this linkage, but then we can only make such a linkage to one other verse, not multiple other verses. But I would say that the answer to your question is yes. We can have different applications of the simple meaning simply because that law can apply in different contexts. If I'm understanding the question correctly, then I would say the answer is yes. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday, regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. Good vach. Shavua tov.